Oh, that's scary. Everybody just disappeared. All right, cool. So, hello everybody. My name is Ben Montville, and I've been a student at ERA for 13 years now. And today, I'm going to get to talk to you about artificial intelligence and this modern revolution, as I call it. Now, throughout the course of this presentation, we're going to start by looking at the history of AI, where it kind of started. And from that, we're going to then learn about how it affects our modern day in the 21st century, and really look at how our lives are really impacted by it. After that, we're also going to analyze this modern day take on artificial intelligence, as well as then diagnose the different issues that there are with it now so that we can have AI better us for the future. Now, starting out with the history, back in 1950, Alan Turing, one of the solvers of the Enigma code, helped to design the Turing test. And what the Turing test was, is it was an assessment that tested the ability for a program to be able to think for itself. So think about comparing something such as a calculator to ChatGPT. Whereas a calculator, you're putting in simple calculations to get fairly simple results. With ChatGPT, you're doing much more complex calculations in order to get more fluent, more human-like answers. One of the first programs to actually pass this test was the logic theorist, which was designed by Alan Newell, Cliff Shaw, and Herbert Simon. These three created one of the first programs that was able to actually, for itself, pass this test, and was one of the first examples of AI. The same summer that the logic theorist was released was the Dartmouth Summer Research Project on Artificial Intelligence, which helped to work as a workshop for all of the main workers in artificial intelligence to come together to try and set some of the standards for the future. Now, unfortunately, no standards were really set at this event. And really all it was a bunch of talking of what could happen and not what would happen. And we feel those issues a lot in the modern day as we look at how it affects us. Now, for artificial intelligence, as with many things, there were a lot of setbacks that were hard to accomplish, such as money, technology, and support. Now, as with most things, it's hard to get technology without money. It's hard to get money without support. And the main thing I want you to focus on here is technology. Because without technology, AI wouldn't be able to exist. Because technology has to be extremely powerful, and you need a lot of processing power in order for AI to exist and function well. So that was one of the biggest setbacks that AI had at the time in order to get to what we know it as today. Now, thankfully, Moore's Law was an example of helping to get artificial intelligence to where it is today. Now, Moore's Law states that computer capabilities roughly double every 2 years. This is why your iPhone is always outdated after like 2 years, and you're always looking at new computers that look way better than what you literally just bought yesterday. It's because the abilities of our processing power, as well as our graphics powers, increase very rapidly. And it's not linear, it's exponential. And because of this, this is what has allowed AI to become what we know it as today in what I will call the modern world. Now, I'm going to throw out a really big number, and I want you all to realize what a big deal this is. Over 250 million companies worldwide use AI in some way. That is insane. That is over 77% of the world population for companies. Even more insane, if we look back to just 2017, that number of 77% would have been only down at 25%. So over 6 years from 2023, when this stat was taken, the number has jumped by over 50%, which is insane. And it really shows how companies nowadays are really focusing on the idea of really wanting to incorporate AI into their programs because they see it as really important for the future. There are 4 main areas I'm going to focus on today. I'm going to focus on business, the stock market, schooling, and the government. Now, first we're going to look at business and stock market, first looking at the stock market. And while I could spend time talking about how artificial intelligence has been used to help create programs that buy and sell stocks individually, completely autonomously, I want to more so focus on how different companies have benefited from AI. So the companies I'm going to mention today are AMD and NVIDIA. These two companies are best known for making computer parts, so things such as GPUs and CPUs. But what they also do, and have been really working on in recent times, is developing AI chips. And these chips are used to make it so that companies can use AI on a much smaller scale. And these mechanisms are able to run AI and therefore have really helped these companies to really surge in the markets. And it's really interesting to see how finding this area where there was need allowed for certain companies to really increase, even without necessarily having to use AI itself. One example that I want to talk about for areas such as business is Figure AI. Now, Figure AI is a robot that is controlled by ChatGPT or OpenAI. And this robot essentially copies the abilities of a human. It can do everything I can do right now in moving, picking up stuff, talking, having conversation. And the reason why this is so important is because it presents a way to have humans and robots be able to work in the field together, to be able to cooperate in order to accomplish certain goals. Think about in a warehouse setting, right? You have a really dangerous job and you don't necessarily want to put a human life at risk. This is a great spot where you can put a robot where if something happens to it, it could be as simple as just getting a couple of parts fixed. Whereas if a person breaks in the same circumstance, it might not be as good. So it's a really good example of how the use of robots can be more efficient in the long term, as well as more cost-effective, and can also just help save lives of people and help fill jobs that may not already have people in them. Now we're going to look at the government and we're going to look at schooling. Now first we're going to look at government. Government, it's really important to acknowledge that AI could be really useful for exploration. When you think about exploration, I like to think about Mars and thinking about how if you have a robot you're trying to communicate, it can take upwards of minutes or even hours to be able to accurately communicate with these robots. So being able to have programs within them that are run through artificial intelligence that allow for them to a certain degree, think for themselves and help to prepare themselves for if something goes wrong, it allows for these robots to not break as often. It allows for us to have more control over understanding what that environment is like. On the other end, on a more controversial area to look at, we can look at warfare. There are a lot of people who would make the argument that the use of AI through warfare would be very beneficial for limiting the amount of human life lost, as well as making it so that it can help to better defend our countries in order to make it so that there is less conflict. When looking at schooling, it's really important to look at companies that have their own programs that help solve problems. Now, personally, I use Grammarly, and I even use Grammarly on my final presentation or on my final essay. And the reason for that was not because I was bored and lazy and didn't want to do it. It was because I wanted to learn more about how I can better write. The purpose of Grammarly and these programs is it uses AI in order to help us write our essays better so that we no longer have to be looking through it constantly and missing stuff. The AI can catch it for us and help us learn for the future so we might not make those mistakes. Also, if we talk about companies such as Chegg or Brandly, which I'm sure a couple of you have heard of, these companies now have programs within them that allow for you to enter in a problem, whether it's physics or math or anything, and it will search through its database in order to find the best answer for you. And sometimes it will even try and use that information to give you your exact answer that you need. So it's a really good way to give access to answers out in when you might not have access to an adult or someone who would know the answer. A good example of this is ChatGPT, which I spoke a little bit about earlier. ChatGPT is very world-renowned and is probably the thing that comes to most people's mind when they think of AI. The ability to enter in a prompt and have it come out with basically any answer. And it's really important at this stage to talk about how AI is not just always correct. It is always making educated guesses. The way that it works is that it takes the information that you have and it tries to make the best logical reasoning for what the correct answer would be. And that's how it's able to do this. And that's kind of the more human aspect of it, is it's coming up with these ideas on its own. Now, it's important to also look at the negatives. Specifically for business, it's really important to look at layoffs. Over the past year, over 20 million layoffs have happened because of companies wanting to focus on artificial intelligence. And this is a problem because no longer is the idea of pairing robots with humans. Now the idea is of replacing humans with robots, which is a problem because then you're removing jobs that people could otherwise have, and that's therefore making it so that they don't have as many places they can go for income, and that can lead to problems with that. Also, when we look at the area of the stock market, it's really important to consider the manipulation and propaganda that can come from it. Specifically, I want to talk about this image here. Now, this image was made about 10 months ago, and it is of an explosion in front of the Pentagon. Now, this image is completely AI generated and otherwise took maybe less than 10 minutes to make. Over the course of 30 minutes, this image would forward itself all the way to Bloomberg and would drop the stock market by over $500 billion. That is a lot of money. That is insane. And to think that this one image caused that downfall is crazy, considering it was just able to spread on Twitter instantly, and there was nothing we could do about it, because even though it was fake, people didn't check their sources. Along with this, we need to look at the issues with schooling and government. Now, for schooling, it's important to acknowledge that just having the answers isn't necessarily what we need. For the purposes of learning more about AI, I actually had one of my paragraphs in my final essay written by ChatGPT. And I entered a prompt saying I wanted to talk about AI and its benefits. I did it. 10 seconds later, done. And that was it. There was nothing else. I didn't learn anything. Nothing was gained from it other than there were some lines on the paper. And I didn't gain anything from that experience. All I did was regurgitate information given to me. And there's a problem with that, because that means that now the point of school is being lost. And rather than students being able to actually learn and do the work themselves, they are putting it through a program and just regurgitating what the program tells them. And that is a serious problem. Also, when we look at government, I really want to focus on this propaganda idea again. And especially in this case, I want to look at deepfakes. Now, deepfakes are fairly common in modern day, especially when we look at things such as Disney, which uses them a lot. They used it to bring back a younger Luke Skywalker in The Mandalorian, and somebody decided to throw Elon Musk's face on Iron Man. But it's also important to realize that it can be used for political propaganda. In these two photos, one of those two photos of Obama is AI generated. And it's the picture that's the picture on the right, which is not the one I would have thought. To further show how important it is to see how scary this is, I'm going to play you a video of anchor for CNN, Anderson Cooper, so you can see how scary it is, how similar you can get it with just a little bit of work.
Second youngest son. He suggested it came out of nowhere. What we subsequently learned is it may have come from the former president or his legal team acting in bad faith. This is a deepfake example of what is possible with powerful computer and editing. It took around 72 hours to create this example from scratch using extremely powerful GPU. It could be improved with more computing time, but 90% of people cannot tell the difference.
And while I'm sure a lot of us in this room could tell that that was the AI-generated one, it is still very scary that in only 72 hours it was able to create that. And there are people in this world who would not be able to tell the difference. Now, with this in mind, we need to look at how we should continue for the future. Now, the first thing I want to bring up is we need to check our sources. Like I said earlier, AI is amazing, and it really allows for us to learn more about it as a whole. But the problem we need to focus on is that not all the information online is correct, and AI isn't necessarily able to tell what is true and what is false. So that's why we always need to make sure we are checking our sources so that we aren't telling people false information and we're not spreading false things. That can stop the issues with like the Pentagon explosion scare so that we're not losing all of that progress that we have for learning more about the truth. Also, we need to consider the dangers and evaluate the usage of certain areas with AI. One thing I always like to bring up in this section is art. A lot of people like to talk about how AI can generate art. And while that's cool and all, we need to consider the fact that art is arguably something that is very human. It's something where we express our emotions and we make it for the purpose of that. And when AI is doing it instead, there is no longer necessarily that emotion. It's now just numbers being thrown into a computer, and it's coming out with this art, which may look amazing, but that might not necessarily be the point we're trying to get at. Finally, we need to educate ourselves. Now, I have 15 minutes to explain this to you. Not gonna lie, this presentation started at 30 minutes, and I had to cut down from there. But with that in mind, that doesn't mean that the stuff I'm telling you is everything. AI grows every single day, and everything is always changing. So that's why I need all of you to go out and learn more about it for yourself. To conclude, AI is powerful and will continue to grow more. AI is advancing and will continue to advance. And AI is the future. We can't escape AI anymore. So the question is, what are all of you going to do to prepare yourself for artificial intelligence and this modern revolution? Thank you.